we said that there were a number of problems associated with national scale adoption of climate smart agriculture, including incomplete articulation of a truly comprehensive climate smart agriculture, a unidimensional design and implementation and evaluation framework, no prioritizing tool against greenwashing, and we spent some time on greenwashing yesterday, the loss of mitigative contributions from CSA towards the nationally determined contributions, which we also discussed yesterday, and the fact that there's no locally verifiable eco-linked quality labeling standard that came up as well. I went on to say, to hint, C SAC does, it separates climate smart agriculture, if you like, into 5 operational arms. So we talk about resource conservation in terms of adaptation, energy use, which has a mitigation and agricultural productivity components. We talk about safety, which involves food security primarily, biodiversity support as a means of adaptation and food security preservation as well, and greenhouse gas reduction, which is purely mitigative. Under the rubric of resource conservation, the climate smart compliant tool looks at land use, water use, nutrients use, including the source of those nutrients, whether they're from fossil fuel based, etc. Labor, how labor is being used, the energy consumption in labor. We look at energy use as a separate subcomponent where we look at power. Where's the power used on the farm coming from? What's the source of lighting? Input manufacture. So you might be using agrochemicals and so that have been produced from non-renewable sources, and we factor that in as well. Your transportation on farm and in terms of deliveries. In terms of safety, we look at production operations, harvesting, storage, and utilization. And with regard to biodiversity support, we look at your land clearing methods, what type of off-site agrochemical impact there is, the limit, how are you limiting the introduction of invasive species or the proliferation of invasive species? Have you fiddled with ecosystem services impact in the sense that have you interrupted some of the either water catchment or other biodiversity linked issues or support mechanisms within the environment? Greenhouse gas reduction. What level of enteric fermentation is associated with your project? Whether you have ruminants on site or not, what are you doing with the manure and the organic fertilizers that you have procured or produced on farm? What happens in terms of your soil management? How have you maintained that carbon and nitrogen balance in the soil so that you have not added undue amounts of greenhouse gases? Fossil fuel use, which is fairly straightforward. And then we look at manure and waste management. So although we looked at enteric fermentation in the case of livestock projects, and I know that it came up yesterday, but the C SAC tool has a special categorization that can handle livestock projects or mixed projects, and how you dispose of your waste. I kept mentioning that this is a self-assessment tool as well as an auditing tool. There's an app that is being modified currently, but we are still using the Excel-based version of the app. What C SAC does is it literally asks 20 questions. In each of the 5 categories, there are 4 questions, which we have just run through the headings for those questions, the subcategories for those questions. If I were to discuss with you the background to the app, what happens behind the scenes in the app, if I use an Excel-based example, which I've done a screen capture here. So if you're looking at a C SAC assessment template for a predominantly cropping project, then when you look at the various categories of compliance that we're looking to evaluate, you're dealing with resource conservation, energy use, safety, biodiversity support, greenhouse gas reduction. In each of these categories, you have the 4 subcategories that I mentioned earlier. Now, at the core of C SAC is a numerical scale that you're going to equate to your qualitative and quantitative answers. So that points column there, I'm going to show you how we arrive at the particular points. Each subcategory has a maximum of 5 points. If you were to score at the highest level in all of those categories, and then I put a score of 100, then we're talking about a level 5 in terms of the degree of compliance that can be ascribed to your climate smart agriculture project. Now, when I say it's an auditing tool, one can, with proper assessment, then compare competing projects in terms of how closely they comply with what would be seen as an ideal climate smart agriculture project that is comprehensive, that is not meant to be part of any greenwashing exercise, that is not singly focused on one aspect. And I think yesterday we beat the example to death about safe driving. In the same way that you cannot just improve one of your driving practices, you may improve the brakes that you're using on the car. But if you continue to drive in the same reckless manner, you can't see that you are now a certified safe driver because you just implemented one aspect of it. This is a comprehensive approach to climate smart agriculture that we're discussing. And as I discussed yesterday, one of the reasons why climate smart agriculture has lost favor, especially in some of the financial institutions, is because of this hodgepodge, unidimensional approach that we have taken to some of the climate smart agriculture projects. So that the level one would be 40 to 50 points, because what it says is that if you cannot score 40 points on this scale, you really do not have a climate smart agriculture project. If you have consistently attained less than 2 marks in each of these categories, and your cumulative score is 40 or less, then really, by this rubric, you're not really participating in a climate smart agriculture project. So the Excel-based version of the app quite simply just gives you a scale, a rating scale, a mechanism to quantitatively address what aspect of the subcategory you're looking at. I think what I've done here in the screen capture is to look at nutrients, and what would happen in the background of the app is that you will be provided with a possible rating scale. So if for the entire project, you're only using inorganic fertilizers, as you see there under 1, then that would be the points ascribed to that project. And you go on varying degrees of complexity and compliance all the way up to what you would offer 5 marks for. So that if one was to comply, literally comply with the ideal or close to ideal situation for each of these subcategories, then one would end up with a perfect score of 100%.